All right, let's open the file on a case that's been cold for, well, over 4 centuries. This is America's oldest and, you could argue, its most haunting missing persons case. For generations, the story of the Lost Colony of Roanoke has been told like a ghost story. But today, we're pulling it out of folklore and putting it where it belongs, under the microscope. We're going to treat this as a real investigation. And every investigation starts with the victims. In this case, it's this number, 115. And we're not just talking about a group of explorers. This was an entire community. Men, women, and children who packed up their lives, crossed an ocean, and gambled everything to build the first English settlement in the New World. They were families hoping for brand new life on this remote little island. So this brings us to the big, baffling question that's obsessed people for centuries. How does that even happen? How does a whole community of 115 people, with their houses, their tools, their entire lives, just disappear, leaving almost nothing behind but silence? That's the question at the heart of our investigation today. To really get this, we have to look at the timeline. The clock starts in 1587. Governor John White gets everyone settled on Roanoke, but they quickly realize they're short on supplies. So White agrees to sail back to England. He promises he'll be back quick, a year at most. But then, history gets in the way. The massive Anglo-Spanish War breaks out. Every available ship is commandeered to fight the Spanish Armada, leaving White completely stranded. And that 1 year turns into 3 long, agonizing years, with his colony, including his own daughter and granddaughter, totally isolated. So when White finally gets back in 1590, the scene he finds is just eerie. But let's look closer at his actual words from his diary, because this is key testimony. He doesn't describe chaos or violence. Notice the phrasing. The houses were taken down. Not burned down, not smashed, but carefully dismantled. And a high palisade, basically a defensive wall, had been built. So this tells us 2 things. 1, they felt threatened enough to build a fort, but 2, they left in an orderly, unhurried way. It was a ghost town, but a tidy one. And get this, there were no bodies, no graves, no skeletons, 0 signs of a fight. All their big, heavy stuff, like cannons and boats, was gone too. It was like they just packed up and moved out. And all that was left behind was one single cryptic clue, 1 word carved into that fence post that would become the absolute center of this entire 400-year-old mystery. Okay, so let's start the investigation properly. Like any good detective on a cold case, the first thing we have to do is rule out the obvious theories, the ones that jump to a violent conclusion. We've got to clear away the noise before we can focus on what the evidence is actually telling us. And this table really shows why the most popular and most violent theories just don't add up. Let's go one by one. A Spanish attack? Makes sense, right? Spain definitely wanted the English gone. But turns out their own super detailed records show they looked for the colony to destroy it, but they never actually found it, so unlikely. What about a massacre by local tribes? Well, the scene itself completely contradicts that. A massacre leaves behind evidence, bodies, signs of a fight. Here, we have the total opposite, an orderly site where houses were carefully taken apart. Verdict? It's inconsistent with the evidence. And finally, what about a disaster, like a hurricane or a drought? Well, we actually know from tree ring data that they landed during the worst drought in 800 years. So yeah, that's a huge reason to leave. But it doesn't explain how calm and deliberate the disappearance was. It's an incomplete explanation. So, with the violent theories pretty much debunked by the crime scene itself, our investigation takes a major turn. We have to stop looking for signs of a fight and start following the one solid lead they left for us. It's time to follow the clue. And that word carved into the post was CROATOAN. Now, for centuries, this word has been treated like some spooky, supernatural curse. But to Governor John White, it wasn't mysterious at all. It was a message. You could basically call it a forwarding address. CROATOAN was the name of a nearby island, what we call Hatteras Island today, and, more importantly, it was the name of a local tribe that was actually friendly with the English. And this is the real clincher. This is the detail that basically closes the book on any theory of a violent attack. Before he left, White had set up a clear plan with the colonists, a kind of pre-arranged code. He told them, if you have to move, carve your destination into a post. But, and this is crucial, if you're in danger, if you were forced to leave, you have to add a Maltese cross above the name. And when he got back, no cross was found. The absence of that cross is a message all by itself. It screams, we left willingly, we are okay,
and this is where we went.
And you know, the evidence for this move to CROATOAN Island is pretty overwhelming. Over 100 years later, in 1709, an explorer met people on that same island who claimed to have white people as ancestors, and some even had gray eyes. Then modern archaeologists started digging and found tons of English stuff: pottery, a gold ring, a sword hilt, all at native village sites on the island. But the real smoking gun, the forensic proof, is something called hammer scale. It's these tiny flecks of iron that fly off when a blacksmith is working. You can't trade it. Finding it there is definitive proof that an English blacksmith was living and working side by side with the Croatan community. So case closed, right?
Well, it seems like the case is solved. The colonists, facing a horrible drought, just moved 50 miles south to live with their allies. It's a logical survival story. But just when we're about to close the file, a modern discovery, something that's been hidden in plain sight for centuries, throws a major twist into the whole investigation.
And the twist comes from our main witness, John White himself. In his own writings, he mentioned that before he even left, the colonists were already talking about moving. But their plan wasn't to go to an island. Their plan was to move 50 miles into the main, as in inland, onto the mainland. This completely contradicts the Croatoan clue. So what was it? The island or the mainland? Did they change their minds? Or was something else going on entirely?
For 400 years, nobody could figure that out. Then, in 2011, researchers at the British Museum are looking at one of John White's own maps. They notice two little paper patches on it, kind of like old-school whiteout. On a hunch, they use modern imaging tech, like X-rays, to see what's underneath. And hidden under one patch, they find a symbol for a fort drawn in red and blue ink. And its location? Almost exactly 50 miles inland from Roanoke. They call it Site X. The map confirmed White's notes all along. There was a secret destination, and somebody tried to cover it up.
This discovery was a bombshell, obviously. It kicked off a whole new archaeological dig at this Site X. And what do you know? When they started digging, they found exactly what the map hinted at: bits of late 16th century English pottery and other metalwork that perfectly matches what the Roanoke colonists would have had with them. This just opened up a whole new and totally credible line of inquiry.
So now our cold case has two really strong, evidence-backed leads pointing in two different directions. One points to CROATOAN Island, south along the coast. The other points to Site X, west into the mainland. For a long time, people saw these as competing theories. But what if they're not? How do we put these two pieces together to finally solve this thing?
So here's the thing. When you lay all the evidence out side by side, you realize the two theories don't actually have to cancel each other out. We have solid physical proof that colonists were on CROATOAN Island, and we have solid documentary and physical proof for a planned move to Site X on the mainland. A good detective doesn't throw out evidence, they figure out how it all fits. And the solution isn't one or the other. It's most likely both. And that brings us to the most logical verdict. The colonists weren't lost at all. They split up. Faced with a crisis, a crippling drought, no help from England, and who knows what other threats, the group made a strategic decision to improve their odds of survival. They dispersed. One group, probably the larger one, went south to live with their allies, the CROATAN people. Another smaller group probably headed west to follow through on their original plan to build a new settlement inland at Site X. They didn't vanish. They assimilated and they relocated. They weren't victims. They were survivors. And that, right there, is the real takeaway. The mystery of the Lost Colony isn't some ghost story about people who disappeared into thin air. It's an incredible story of survival. It's about a group of people adapting to a brand new world by becoming a part of it. So the question we should be asking isn't whether they survived. The evidence strongly suggests many of them did. The real, and way more interesting question is, what happened next? And where in America's giant genetic and cultural map might their descendants be living today?